One can only dream, muse, or even speculate about the mystery of the day-to-day happenings within the sacred walls of the majestic Baroque architectural ensemble known as Pažaislis, Hill of Peace, in Lithuania. Today it remains one of the most valuable architectural monuments in all of Central Europe. Its history is distinctive and multifaceted, one of life, death, and resurrection. It was built in 1664 by Christopher Patsis, the Chancellor of Lithuania, as a Catholic monastery for the white-robed Camaldolese monks who were hermits. They spent many decades there in prayerful silence, fulfilling the intent of the founder as a place of prayer. History, politics, and religious differences caused the monastery to change hands several times. When the original proprietors, the Camaldolese monks, were evicted in 1832 by Tsarist Russia, the monastery was then governed by the Russian Orthodox monks. World War I brought their stay to an end, and the empty monastery was then given to a Lithuanian-American congregation of sisters, the Sisters of St. Casimir of Chicago. This congregation was founded by a native Lithuanian, Mother Maria Kaupas, who was invited by the Lithuanian bishops to return to her homeland to establish her community of sisters there and to found schools. From Pažaislis, her congregation conducted schools throughout Lithuania and cared for the elderly. Throughout her own lifetime, the foundress of this community, Mother Maria Kaupas, was held to be a very holy woman. Consequently, her life is currently being studied in Rome for sainthood. With the communist occupation of Lithuania in the 1940s, the Sisters of St. Casimir were evicted from Pažaislis. The government seized the property and endeavored to carry out other activities within this masterful Baroque complex, but each was unsuccessful. Finally, in 1992, the Free Lithuanian government restored the monastery to the rightful owners, the Lithuanian Sisters of St. Casimir. To this day, the sisters carry out a spirit of prayer and ministry for the children and the people of Lithuania within this historic Baroque architectural pearl of the 17th century. During the summers, a festival of music is held in this sacred space, and world-renowned directors and composers continue to fill the hearts of all with the spiritual harmony and a breath of heaven, as its founder, Christopher Patsis, intended it to be.
Long ago, here the thick forest swayed. The waves of the Nemunas River rippled quietly, and near the river a high hill was visible. In the year of the Lord, 1661, one inclement February morning, two people, wearing rough white wool clothes, appeared here. They walked through the forest, climbed up the hill and prayed, and said in short, "The place is good." Those were friars of the Camaldolese hermits at Pažaislis.
Kiek niokotas, Pažaislis nesuniokotas. Liko dar tas dangus, bet liko tik tai freskos.
Although Pažaislis was somewhat ravaged through the centuries, it was not destroyed. The same sky remained, but only in paintings did it reveal how it looked earlier. And now sometimes when one passes it in the evening, especially in the fall when it is foggy, it looks so weary, so old with its peeling walls, and one remembers its richness in former times when the building was proudly decorated, and one looked to the woods and then downhill and pondered. Those were the times.
Truly those were the days. The solemn and tragic Pažaislis convent history began with the monastery's Camaldolese order, whose cradle was in Italy. The order's founder was Benedictine brother Saint Romuald.
In the St. Romuald Chapel, there is a fresco that looks very alive, which depicts St. Romuald as he sees himself in a dream. He is sitting under a tree and praying the rosary. Behind his shoulder, an angel pokes him and shows him a ladder on which some young men dressed in white are climbing towards heaven.
St. Romuald considered that dream to be a message from God, and he decided to establish a monastery on that spot. Traveling to see the bishop for permission, he met Count Maldoli, who also had a similar dream. Count Maldoli donated some land for the construction, and thanks to him the monastery was named Camp di Maldoli, and from that arose the name Camaldolese. This was in the year 1012. After the passing of 6 centuries, a descendant of a famous and wealthy Lithuanian family, Christopher Zygimantas Pacas went to Italy to study. There in Perugia he became acquainted with members of the Camaldolese order. He was very impressed with their asceticism and devotion. To his delight, he also met there a Lithuanian monk, Hieronymus. From then on, Pacas could not stop thinking about establishing a Camaldolese monastery in Lithuania. Upon becoming chancellor to Lithuania's Grand Duchy, he invited the monks Hieronymus and Bernhard to look over his selected location and appealed to Pope Alexander VII for permission to establish a monastery and a novitiate for Lithuanians. In July 1661, the Pope gave permission to establish a monastery with 12 members. The first prior appointed was Hieronymus. Preparation work began. Uprooting trees, building of a wharf, a church and several little houses for the monks were built on the hill.
According to the great Grand Chancellor's instructions, the foundation celebration ceremonies were to take place regardless of the weather. It was November, and the rain poured. But on the day of the celebration, the wind chased away the clouds and the sun came out. This was a wonderful sign. With the sounding of the bells and playing of the orchestras, the crowd, carrying pictures and crucifixes, was drawn to the monastery's hill. After Holy Mass, Bishop Jurgis Belazoras of Vilnius read the donation act of the monastery's founder.
Inasmuch as God's greatness raised our homeland from ruins, while praying I was moved in spirit, and determined that from my own means I will fund the Camaldolese order. By this donating act, I gave to the Honorable Fathers the Pažaislis estate with all its buildings, villages, lakes and rivers, forests, pastures and windmills, and 2 royal villages, renouncing all rights to them for myself and my heirs. And of the Camaldolese monastery, I ask for peace and tranquility, and to name the hill Mons Pacis, Hill of Peace. Thus the honored fathers must pray night and day for God's mercy, and that Lithuania's Grand Duchy would be able to enjoy peace, health, and safety. Also I pray that you remember me, the founder, and remember my wife, living or dead, in your daily prayers. Finally, I swear in and oblige the honorable fathers to keep the regulations of their order faithfully. In confirmation, I sign and seal this document as the Lithuanian Grand Duchy Chancellor Christopher Zygimantas Pacas. Pažaislis Manor in the year of our Lord 1664, November 3.
Wishing to organize an especially artistic ensemble, Pacas hired Italian artists to complete the work. He invited architect Gian Battista Frediani and later brothers Carlo and Pietro Puttini. Marble was brought from the Krakow, Poland quarry by water and dry land. Iron came from Riga and Danzig. This took a few months. The sculptures were cut from stone by Michael Volchet. The well-known Jonas de la Marsas installed the bells. The best goldsmiths from Lithuania and elsewhere were asked to make the church vessels. The Grand Chancellor did not spare any expense. According to legend, the monastery's building cost 8 barrels of gold, but the exact sum is not known by anyone because Christopher Patzas tore up the expense list and threw it into the fire, saying,
"What I gave in God's honor, may it be known to him alone." In 1674, the church was finished, but work on its fixtures and decor continued for a few more decades.
In 40 years' time, the monastery was completed, and the order spoke highly of it, attributing to the building itself this statement: "In the year 1712, I lifted my head toward heaven, and I stand as a monument stronger than bronze on this hill of peace."
Christopher Zigmantas Patzas did not live to see the completion of the work. He died January 10, 1684. His wife, Clara Isabel Genevieve Eugenia, Countess de Mailly Lascaris, outlived him by almost a year. The Baroque coffins of Patzas and his wife were placed next to their son's silver coffin in the church's burial crypt, which at the time was decorated with frescoes and paintings. All his wealth he left to his adopted son, Casimir Michael Patzas, requiring him to continue working on the monastery. Later, when at last the ensemble was completed, the monastery's great beauty drew many people who looked upon the site as a miracle. A visitor to the monastery would first see the large gates in the form of a triumphant arch made of Scandinavian sandstone. Formerly, the gate had been decorated with the sculptures of Michael Volcet. Walking through the gates, a visitor would find himself on a pathway lined with old linden trees planted by the founder himself. At the end of the path, an oval garden meets the facade of a quaint guest house, and there stands the holy gates.
On one side of the pathway is the Old Testament. On the other side, once you pass the holy gates, is the New Testament. It used to be that each person entering had to pass those 3 large doors, that is, to wash off his or her sins. When you pass through the holy gates into the building, if you lift up your head high, you will see a coat of arms showing 2 doves drinking from a cup. These 2 doves are to remind us of Saint Romuald and Saint Benedict. The yard is a rectangular. The north side once was a smithy. A windmill is on the south side. Lengthwise at the axis are 3 remarkably beautiful linden trees, on one side and also on the other, which symbolize the Patzas family members, all 3 of them. The very first linden trees were planted by the founder. Beside the linden trees are 2 wells called the Camaldolese wells. They symbolize God's eyes, while the linden trees serve as eyelids which cover and protect the wells. It was at one time forbidden for members of the Camaldolese order to eat meat, so they used to raise turtles in those spots, and on July 2nd, during the large beautiful church festival, they would have something to feed the guests.
And at last, before us is the most important building, the church. It stands out not only because of its size, but also because of its beautiful expressive architecture. Its six-sided drum holds the dome with its lantern. High up, the clock towers and uniquely arched central facade give the building a fascinating charm. On the other side, the arched stairs seem to say,
"Come in good, depart better." Each of the facade's decorative details is used very successfully and harmoniously blends into the architecture as a whole. In the center of the facade is a large portal made of sandstone. Above it, elegantly framed, is the Baroque Pazza symbol. The church is named after the Visitation of Mary. Next to the church stands the two-story convent. Its wings contain closed yards with galleries. At one time, on certain summer days, mysterious shadows used to fall on the altar from the open arcades.
The southern gallery is known as the minor altar of the Camaldolese. The clock, of course, no longer has its original beauty. That clock was restored during the Russian occupation. However, this and other restorations were performed carelessly, and the indicator was also broken by carelessness.
Where the shadows fall, you will see the numbers, showing the hour of the day in local time. It is quite accurate. When there is no sunlight, there is no shadow. And of course, if there is no shadow, our clock is stopped and we are living without hours.
And that clock presents such a profound